Welcome back to Module 3 of EverydayPBL.com's Beginner's Guide to Project-Based Learning. This module, we're going to talk about those targeted skills. So let's go ahead and hit the PLP again. We're down to the third tab, Targeted Skills, and make sure we have that pulled up in our PLP. So let's scroll down. Alright, so let's hit the web page and let's see what they're looking at. I know we have 4 steps here. The first step is going to be targeted content. And here we're looking at what are the skills associated with the project and how are you going to target each individual skill. Are the targeted skills specifically driven by the TEKS? I made the point in Module 1. We teach TEKS, or skills. Here's the one catch. And it's why I also said you need to have your TEKS handy. There will be times where the targeted skill, your students haven't mastered the skills below that. So you need to be able to look at what are those foundational skills. Like for example, if I want my students to write a thesis statement, yet they can't write incomplete sentences, I'm going to have some work to do. So you need to make sure you've spiraled and thought about what foundational skills your students might need. On the flip side of that, you also need to look at the other end. You're going to have students who have mastered your foundational and your emergent skills, and they're going to be really ready for those challenging mastery skills. So you need to look at what's on the other side so you can also challenge your students. But what is the targeted content? Let's go ahead and flip over in the exemplar. We're going to talk about the major TEKS in this project, and it looks like I got 6 of them. We're going to talk about genre and theme. We're going to talk about characterization, point of view, literary devices, and then moving into writing, we're going to talk about organization and expository writing. So those are going to be the skills that I'm going to really focus in on. Now that's not to say I'm not going to cover the rest, but these are the targeted skills. Everything else will be targeted in another lesson. Alright, so moving on to step 2 now. Now we're going to look at targeted research skills, because content knowledge and research are 2 different things, and so there's going to have to be some research involved. How are you going to get the students to access the information they need to get? Part of PBL is this active exploration and this independent discovery. You can't just give them the resources all day long and expect them to learn. You have to teach them how to use those resources so they can find them on their own. So what sources do you want them to use? You have to think about that. What sources are you going to give them? What sources are you going to expect them to find on their own? And then when they don't have the necessary research skills to complete the project, how are you going to scaffold them up? Or what scaffolding are you prepared to offer them? So again, let's go ahead and look at the exemplar here. I'm going to do some work on credibility of sources. There are going to be some mythology websites that we go to, but we're going to talk about how you can discern a credible from an incredible or a discreditable source. I will be giving them some source material, and I will be expecting them to find some on their own. We're going to have, as this is our first project, we're going to have a really good discussion on Wikipedia and how Wikipedia is not the bane of all existence if you use it right. If you just go to Wikipedia and take the work right off of there, yeah, it's pretty awful. But if you're going and looking at their source material and going to those sources, you might be alright. And then we're also going to have a big plagiarism workshop, and that's going to be one of those workshops I require of everybody, so we're all speaking the same language when it comes to plagiarism. So now moving forward, we're going to go on to step 3, and now we're talking about the targeted literacy skills. We talked a little bit about this in the module 2 when we talked about the literacy task, and really you're going to break literacy skills down into 3 categories. You're going to either be talking reading comprehension, the writing process, or the writing skills. Reading comprehension, you're asking them, what are you going to ask to read? How are you going to monitor their comprehension? And how are you going to support those struggling readers? A lot of reading comprehension can also be tacked in with our literacy vocabulary component, which will come in Module 5. The writing process there, that's the pre-writing, rough draft, revision and editing. the writing process. So how are you going to facilitate the writing process throughout this project? Because that's one thing, is writing takes time. You can't just say, I want a final draft tomorrow. They have to be able to have time to pre-write, to draft, or else they're not going to turn in a final draft. They're going to turn in a rough draft. Alright, and then lastly, you're looking at the writing skills. What aspects specifically are you looking for? Are you going to grade them on their organization? Are you going to grade them on their use of a thesis statement and support? Are you going to grade on whether or not they use evidence? If they're doing a persuasive essay, are you going to grade them on whether they're using the persuasive techniques? How are you going to grade their paper? What writing skills specifically are you looking for? So, literacy across curriculum is vital. Our students have to be engaged in the written word in every class. So let's go ahead and look at the exemplar. Alright, for reading comprehension, we're going to be doing active reading. We're going to be doing some workshops on how you actively read. We're going to talk about think like a reporter. That's a strategy that you can use, the 5WH, the who, what, where, when, why, how. I'm going to show them Cornell notes, and I'm also going to show them some annotation where they're writing in the text, probably not the books, probably articles. For the writing, we're going to talk about bubble maps, main idea organizers. I'm going to have them pick one and stick with it, and that's going to be their baby. And then I'm really focusing in on thesis for this unit. We're going to really hammer thesis hard. I'm going to teach them a basic thesis writing strategy where they take the prompt, flip it around, make it a statement. There's your thesis. I'm also going to be looking at thesis organization and then that technical writing, the voiceless writing component. So, moving down now back to our website. Now step 4 is pause and reflect. Again, we have 4 questions here. Have you prioritized the most important skills? What prior knowledge do your students have to assist them? And then with the assessment of these skills, be individual or group, both, or what? And then the last question is, have you built in sufficient time to scaffold these skills properly? Going back there, the first question, are the skills scaffolded in a way that builds on each other? That's really what you want to talk about. Is there a logical progression of skills? Are you looking for mastery before you're looking for foundational? That doesn't make sense. So make sure that you've prioritized your skills and you're taking them from point A to point B. Moving down, what prior knowledge? Really, you have to look at what knowledge your students are going to have before they go into the room, and what are they going to need to be able to be successful in this project. Alright, the next question you have is, are they going to be doing things all in groups? If they're all in groups, how are you going to know individually if each student has attained the skills they need? So you have to have that good blend of group collaborative work and individual work so you can ensure that every single student has shown mastery. And then lastly, have you built in sufficient time to scaffold these skills properly? Remember, you have X time to teach Y skills. So make sure that you're teaching enough time to cover all the skills and you're not just wasting time on skills that don't really need to be covered. So let's look at the exemplar, and I typically will take you through my answers. We have a little bit of an interesting project here because the focus is going to switch from narrative to expository, but it's narrative reading, expository writing, and it's kind of fun and it works out really well that way. I'm going to need to make sure that they have some basic grammatical structure knowledge for the writing portion, but other than that, they can pretty much start as a blank slate with this. The game board's going to be grouped, the essay's going to be individual. I do that a lot. I will have a group project, but the literacy task will be individual. Sometimes I will flip it and I'll have the project be individual, and then the literacy task, they'll write a team paper, and those are kind of fun as well. So, and then the last question, have I built in sufficiently time? My answer to that is generally probably not. But because we're switching to 50-minute periods this year and other factors involved, I have some wiggle room and I have some time I can play with. So moving on, there's one last section that I'm going to mention here in this segment here, and that goes back to the school-wide learning outcomes. As with page 1 of the PLP, as with the skills, resources, and context, the school-wide learning outcomes are individualized for each school, and they can be quite contentious. So I am not discussing them in depth here. You do need to have that conversation with your administrator and find out what they want to do about school-wide learning outcomes. But they would go here where you spell out how you're going to satisfy the different components of your learning outcomes. And that was Module 3, talking about targeted skills and content for the Beginner's Guide to Project-Based Learning. Module 4, we will cover the learning plan and scaffolding.